My name is Michael McLoughlin. I am a sculptor by training. I studied sculpture in Limerick School of Art and Design in the early 90s, and I've been making mainly sound-based installations and drawing-based projects in social contexts. Um, Pretty much since then, and I've been continue to do that and continue to do that to this day, in different places, with different groups of people. But the main thread that runs through a lot of the work that I'd make will be what happens within a group of people, how people get to know each other, how they make sense of the relationship they have between each other, and the mechanisms that we use to present the ideas that we have about self and around each other and around placemaking a lot. How we form groups, how we relate to the towns we live in, and trying to find ways to explore those things artistically, in collaboration with groups of people from particular communities of place or of interest. For me, when I started working in a way that would be considered a social practice, the term really didn't exist, and in the meantime there's been lots of terms of that kind that we've kind of moved from one term to the next, and at the core of it, it's just an acknowledgement that that work happens in and around and like adjacent to and with an acknowledgement of the society it exists within. So it's kind of that. It's as much acknowledging that our practice doesn't exist in a vacuum, that it can't exist without the society around it. At the core of it, it's meeting people, chatting, like sort of exploring ideas. It's a way of working that it's totally dependent on the people you meet and how you get on with the people you meet, because that's how the processes develop. And just having a real curiosity about that, about meeting new people and hearing their stories. I suppose one of the starting points is it's understanding what your role is in, and what it isn't probably, and understanding why you're there in a particular place. You're often asked to come in as an artist and do something with the group, as if the knowledge lies with you, and then realizing actually it doesn't. So trying to do something that acknowledges the knowledge, the understanding, the connectiveness that exists within groups that meet week in, week out, and support each other week in, week out, and trying to tell that story, and try to tell what the hopes are with it, but then trying to kind of give a sense of a picture that's in my head, and hope that somebody else can begin to see what that might look like, and for them to go, I don't know what you're talking about, but maybe we'll do it anyway and see what happens. Ideal Homes was a project that resulted in an exhibition of sculptural objects and sound panels, and mainly audio work that was developed over a period about a year. Sometimes it's hard when you look back and say it's about a year. All the projects seem to be about a year or 2 years. The proposed project was around, well, what do people in the travelling community in South Dublin County, what's their dream, as opposed to what will they settle for. So that was the starting point of this Ideal Homes project. It was this kind of notion of, there's the consultations and the kind of the moving of markers, and go, well, what that, you know, to separate that from actually, you know, when you dream about this, like ideal, what does that look like? The project developed over 2001 in particular, in and through regular meetings with 5 people in a group housing scheme for traveller families in Kimmage in Dublin, and over that time, every week I'd call to each person for about an hour, and we'd talk about their dream home, and I'd try and draw what's been said, and we kind of figure out, like, down to the furniture in all the rooms, and what's the wall, or is there wallpaper, colours, like the full, what these dream homes would look like, where they were, the architecture, and then as the project developed, we recorded almost like testimonies or tours that kind of related to these homes.
Your front door, you have your sitting room on your left hand side and your kitchen on the right. So we start with the kitchen. You go into the kitchen, you've got your tables and chairs. Your kitchen is white. That was the white kitchen.
Early in the project, the way we were working, we had the conversations. I'd go away, I'd listen, I'd make drawings, really nice, neat drawings of what was said, and come back. And I can think of Mary, one of the participants, who's going, no, that's not quite it, no. And we did that for quite a while. And then I started to try and draw while I was hearing what was being said, and just more immediately responding to what was being said. And it was, I remember Mary saying, actually, you know, that's it, it's more like that. And it was, what the drawing was more me trying to listen to Mary and put on paper what I was hearing, rather than me reinterpret Mary through this kind of lens of what drawing's supposed to look like and what a good drawing is. So it took that out of the equation. So these kind of looser drawings, almost like what I do in the phone. Do you know, it's kind of, this is more like doodling or whatever, you know, but it was more accurate, which was interesting. So that guided the process, and it was time intense project, and not for me. Like, I was there, I was commissioned, it was my job to be there, but it was happening in people's homes. So it was in the kitchens of the 5 participants of the project. So they were providing the space for the project, heating, tea and biscuits, and all the, you know, sort of, so you're kind of the light and heat, the venue, all of these things that are important and costed elements, if you were kind of looking at a project, were provided by the 5 participants and collaborators in making the work. And also the whole project and the outcomes from it. So there's an aesthetic thing that I do as an artist, but at the core of it, the words, the ideas, these imaginings of these dreams, where the 5 people I was working with. For me, that became problematic in a way that it was kind of seemed a bit unfair that I was getting paid for my time and they weren't. And so there was a particular stage in that process where we had to just even to revisit that, and to work out a rate of payment for people, just to acknowledge their role in the development of the work and their role as true collaborators in the work. It's something that is, I think it's important to consider in any project, who not just in terms of the remuneration, but really just in terms of how people are getting involved, why they're getting involved, what's the situation they're in, how dependent is the project on them. It's being cognizant of the needs and of the people who you would hope to be involved in the project with you, what's necessary for to enable them to have that level of involvement. So I had this idea, and which was living in my head for a long time, and I was trying to figure out, well, how do I do that, or what would I do? And initially I did a test of one conversation. I recorded a lunch in Dingle, out in Ballyferriter in the Dingle Peninsula, and it was part of a group exhibition there, and we a group of people from the town, and they'd lunch with microphones, and after the lunch we took everything away, and all you were left with was the speakers and the sound of this conversation that had taken place. So that was kind of a test. So with Cumann, I approached Marcella Bannon in Droichead Art Centre. When you're thinking about who you approach and why you approach, you're approaching places and people who you think might be interested in processes and particular work, and you can kind of get a sense of that. But I knew that Droichead had a long relationship with developing work that had some social connection with the town and an openness to that. So that's kind of, you're aware that a place has an openness, and that's half the battle, sort of in terms of the approach. Also, just in terms of the size of Drogheda, I just thought that it'd be really, it would make sense in terms of the mapping, because the size of the town, and an art centre that has a real connection with the town. So I approached Droichead, saying, well, this is something that I'd like to do, and I think it'll really work in Drogheda, and if I was to apply to the Arts Council for project funding to try and develop this further, would that be something that you'd be interested in? And they were enthusiastic about that, and then in the process of making an application, Droichead would have kind of reached out to groups that they would have a connection with, and it began the conversations. But it's a conversation that starts in principle, if this happens, maybe could we do this or whatever, but as opposed to approaching somebody going, I want to do this now, what are you going to do for me? That kind of, so it's building, it's in the same, it's the exact same as the thing that happens within the work. It's trying to or happens in any social sphere. You're building a team, and you're building interest, or you're kind of you're telling a story. I can imagine the forest of speakers and walking through and hearing Drogheda and hearing the conversations that make up Drogheda, and I'd really like to do that, and if we can figure out how to do it, would you like to be involved in that? So that's so there's nothing definite, but you've an idea and maybe a way to try and realise it. From that, beginning to develop relationships with other groups, because you have a relationship then with the arts centre, and then it's time, like even just going visiting people that you it isn't, because of the nature of this particular project, you're kind of contacting and meeting groups and who mightn't be involved in the final process, but you've met them and you've told them about it, and they've kind of thought about it and decided, no, we don't want to be involved in that, and that's okay, but that's all part of it. And in some ways that's like, it's part of this kind of process of telling people about, this is the idea, I have an idea, can I tell you the idea that I have? And so there's the people who might be part of that journey, and then there's others but you've had really nice conversations with about things that interest them and what interests you. So I think that's an important part of the process. So one of the important things to remember is really it's you're coming with you've a toolkit, you've things that are of interest to you, and it's about sharing. So it's being able to share these things that are interest to you with other people, and then to see where that goes, and to build on that, because it is about it's sharing and figuring out what's going to work, but also it's relevance as well. It's as if it's understanding that what you think is brilliant might have no relevance to somebody else, and that's okay. But so in terms of that journeys and meeting people halfway and things, you've to try and have an understanding of what that might be, what that halfway is, or what that point of intersection between your interests and theirs where that lies, and to figure out, well, how can we work together in and around that. One of the links between the Ideal Homes project and the Common project is around this representation and this idea of we press the button, we record, and that's what's recorded. That's it. There's no edit. There's no and one of the reasons, and then if somebody doesn't like it, then it's just not used. Then you kind of, it's simple. You kind of just, well, no, we won't use that recording, and we'll record another one, or we kind of, so it's that simple premise that something's recorded. We're really aware that this recording is happening, and it will be presented just as I said it. And the Common project really came about from Ideal Homes and from a lot of projects I've been working on since then, where it came about from an awareness that in the different places and different organisations that I would have worked, and the different groups that I would have met, and be privileged to be part of the activities they were involved in, and I became more and more aware that actually the interesting thing that they were doing was the thing that they do themselves all the time. And the interesting thing was often how they engage with each other, and how they support each other, and how on week in, week out, the meeting, the structures that they've set up for themselves, that enable them to do that. That was kind of what's interesting. Sometimes the activity is secondary, and the art activity that might happen around it is secondary to that again. So as to I know, in fairness, like, sort of, that's if for this. So you've different projects in different places and different ways of working. So whereas Ideal Homes was a project that it's quite intimate in its week, like it's one-to-one meetings, week in, week out, over a long period of time. Whereas with Common, it was trying to map a place. So you've got a town like Drogheda, and Drogheda's populated with about 40,000 people in Drogheda, and how do you represent Drogheda? And how do you represent the groups that meet in Drogheda every week, and things that happen, the support structures that are there, and the conversations that happen. And it's just trying to imagine a way of mapping place through the conversations that define a place. Each group approached being recorded in a different way. So, and the different way they did it was based on the way that they, week in, week out, understand each other and understand how they work in relation to each other. So and then with those recordings, if somebody decided that they didn't, if a group decided that they didn't really like the recording, or they didn't want it to be an exhibition, and that's okay. That's part of it. That each group have power veto over the future and when that's heard, who can hear it, how it can be heard, and I think it was quite important in terms of if you think of the time between Ideal Homes in 2001 and Common in Drogheda in 2016, and over that time the availability of audio and video and the development of the structures, the social media structures, the sharing structures online, by the time of the common project, it was really easy to share audio in a way that it wasn't quite as easy in 2001. And whereas in 2016, in terms of representation, the question would have been more, well, because you can share it, does that mean you should? Whereas in 2001 you're thinking about how do you share it, and whereas the others are actually, there's a little bit of a pause. Maybe this conversation is special. Maybe people should go and visit it and stand in it, and it should be more of an embodied experience. And the potential for it to be misrepresented is just how do you minimize those possible misrepresentations of conversation. Like, we kind of talk about social practice and ways of working in different social contexts, and so while that's happened within a creative field, it simultaneously happened in all sorts of fields, in sciences, in social sciences, in sport. You know what I mean? Sort of in terms of how you like sport partnerships, and there's this whole wealth of knowledge and expertise and people doing sort of similar stuff that it's easy to forget they're there and to think that the expertise is only from within your own field, when it's not. It's to kind of think broader than the church you'd usually look to. I was really surprised to figure out that some of the things that I was trying to tease out in terms of conversation and how people form groups and how people think about these relationships that they have within groups and this kind of social interactions and sense making that happens in conversation. So, teasing that out through our practice, but not realizing that in parallel that there's people been doing that for a long time in sociology, and like in a really in-depth way. So it's kind of recognizing that there's people who are, and you'll find them within the groups that you are within the partnerships and groups and collaborations that you find along the way. There's lots of people who are investigating the same things as you, and to enable enable those potential intersections to happen, and to enable those journeys to kind of like be as fruitful as they can.